Can you settle down, comrades? We've still got Monty Johnstone to sum up for the Communist Party.
Right. Comrades, those who believe that it might be worthwhile hearing another point of view, I won't also be able to answer more than a small part of the points that have been made in the discussion this evening. Let me first of all say, however, that I find it very difficult indeed to understand the kind of conspiracy theory that Comrade Mardell developed both here this evening and in some of his writings, which attribute to communists who have given their life fighting for the cause of socialism, many of them in the leadership of parties like the Italian and the French, actually in concentration camps and prisons under the fascist regime, that they want to serve capitalism, that they are, as he puts it in one of his articles, attempting a cover-up in order to hide from the Italian workers a strategy for serving the cause of capitalism. Why the hell should they? We are used to having that sort of stuff from Jerry Healy, but one would have expected a higher level of analysis and a little bit more respect for other people in the labour movement from people like Comrade Mardell. The simple fact of the matter is that whether you agree with it or not, the Italian communists and the other communists have devised their strategy because we believe that it is the most effective way, under the conditions existing in Western Europe, of advancing the people of our countries towards socialism. And our arguments should be treated at their face value, not, as Mardell puts it, as a cover-up, as a hypocrisy in order to serve the cause of capitalism that for some reason we've come round to serving. It used to be said by Trotsky that the Western Communist parties did this at the bidding of the Soviet bureaucracy, which was afraid of a revolution because it would destroy its privileges. They can't say that anymore because it's clear that our communist parties have got an independent position. So, for some other reason unexplained, we have gone into, apparently, the service of capitalism. The fact of the matter is, you know, comrades, that in 12 countries in the world since the last World War, these communist parties, condemned by the programme of the Fourth International as being counter-revolutionary and totally contrary to the predictions and expectations of Trotsky and the Trotskyists, led revolutions, but in general not in the developed countries of Western Europe. The difference is not that communists in those countries want socialism and in Western Europe want to serve the bourgeoisie. The difference is that it's a damn sight more complex, as Lenin himself emphasized, to carry through a revolution in the citadels of Western imperialism and Western capitalism than it was in the third world countries where the communists in fact led the overthrow of capitalism and the establishment of socialist economies. We recognize very clearly the nature of the structural crisis of capitalism. There are differences between communist parties on the question of austerity, as has been pointed out, but not in the way which Mardell implies. That is to say, it is true that the Italian Communist Party, unlike the French and the others, argues that as a result of the shift in the position which he welcomes and which communists welcome generally of the third world countries to get a higher price for the primary products which they produce and so on, that the consumer model of society with the emphasis on the individual motor car and all the rest of it is going to need to be transformed. But, and if you read the documents of the Italian Communist Party, which bear no relation whatsoever to the distorted picture of them that you get from Mardell and the Trotskyist press, you will see that it is argued that this should be done not on the basis of the working class making sacrifices in order to help the capitalists gain profits in order to accumulate them and therefore make more profits out of private industry, but on the basis of the development of a control over the economy, a social control, and the transformation of the country under the forces led by the working class. The whole of the perspective is a perspective of gaining hegemony within an alliance in which the working class will more and more play the leading role. It hasn't yet got that, whatever anybody likes to say, but it is a struggle in order to do that, in order that the transformation for socialism can be carried through. We do not say, and Jeff Roberts certainly did not say, as the transcript rules show, that this can take place by avoiding confrontations at all costs. Of course, the struggle will take extremely sharp forms. Every Communist Party makes this clear. Every Communist Party makes it clear that the bourgeoisie will resist to the best of its ability, because the bourgeoisie has never voluntarily given up its power and its privileges. And anybody who followed the discussions inside the Communist parties, which are still going on the lessons of Chile and so on, will have seen the important attention that we gave to the whole question of winning over the armed forces, giving the rights to the army for trade union organisation, the attention given by the French party also to the police with its papers published for the police and meetings and so on and so forth. These are all part and parcel of our recognition that it's a question of winning over not only the population as a whole, but also those sections of the population who form the repressive section of the state apparatus. And as Jeff said, we have no illusions that the people holding the key positions in those crucial and most hardcore sections of the bourgeois state apparatus will need to be removed. I said the same thing at the beginning. You can't pass over to socialism and build a socialist economy with the old capitalist state apparatus. But our argument is that that does not presuppose the necessity of the same kind of frontal confrontation as you had in the Soviet Union in 1917. And our argument is that Trotsky and the Trotskyists following him, although on certain things, and of course the example of Germany in 1929 to 33 is a positive case, but in general did not in fact follow the policy of a specific analysis of the national peculiarities and specificities in particular countries, but superimposed the model of the October Revolution. And the Spanish Civil War, which has been mentioned, is a perfect case in point. If you read this compilation of Trotsky's on the Spanish Revolution, you will see Trotsky writing on the 30th of July 1936 his program for how to win the revolution in Spain. It's all assumed to be very simple. And Trotsky says, if this was carried out, and I quote him, the fascist army could not resist the influence of such a program for 24 hours. 24 hours, comrades. The soldiers, these are the fascist soldiers in the fascist parts of Spain, yes, the soldiers would tie their officers hand and foot and turn them over to the nearest headquarters of the workers' militia. Do you think that that was based on a serious analysis, Comrade Mandel?
It was actually happening in Spain. It was happening.
In the fascist areas of Spain, Trotsky is arguing that if this program is carried out, the fascist soldiers will tie their officers hand and foot and in fact bring the war to an end, would disintegrate within 24 hours. It's not a question of isolated cases of this, that and the other. It's always possible to show individual cases and so on of this, that and the other, just like Mondel showed cases of workers' councils coming up and embryo Soviets, that they were sometimes described here and there and so on. It's a question of the main form. Now, as far as this is concerned, this particular analysis, so-called, made by Trotsky on the 30th of July 1936, we look a little bit further on, 5 pages to be precise, and we find a letter from Trotsky on the 16th of August 1936, in which he says to Jean Roux, who is his representative in Spain, the level of information reaching me from Spain stands at 0. In other words, this brilliant analysis of how the fascist army was going to disintegrate in the course of 24 hours as a result of what Trotsky had believed on the basis of the experience of the October Revolution to be the correct program was thought up not on the basis of any concrete analysis. And comrades, I would argue that that kind of wishful thinking on the one hand, combined with a superimposition of the model of the October Revolution on the other as being the one which will succeed because it succeeded in Russia, therefore it must succeed elsewhere. That is the kind of model that guides Comrade Mandel and the Trotskyists at the present time. And, of course, it is very heartwarming to the converted to hear this sort of thing. I was at meetings in Paris in May and June where there was enormous support and so on among people for this sort of thing, and the socialist revolution could be carried through and so on and so forth. But in fact, comrades, don't confuse the kind of support that you get among comrades who come to these sort of meetings with the actual position which exists outside among the mass of the working people, because it evades the reality, the very deep-seated reality of the implantation of bourgeois and social democratic consciousness among wide sections of the working people. That is the main thing that has prevented the carrying through of socialist revolution in Western Europe up to now, and the main thing which is required in order to get the victory of such a revolution is precisely the shifting of that consciousness through experience of struggle, plus the educational work, discussion, debate, and all the rest of it, but above all, through the working people actually getting experience more and more of playing a leading role in taking over society. And that doesn't mean running the bourgeois state for the bourgeoisie. It means, in fact, transforming that state and getting rid of the bourgeoisie as a ruling class, but if possible not in a frontal confrontation with the bourgeoisie as a whole, but by getting the widest possible unity in the first instance against the monopoly sections of the bourgeoisie that can be isolated as the enemies not only of the working class directly, but of wide sections of middle strata and even small bourgeois and so on, and to carry the country along the road to socialism. And it is absolute nonsense to say that we believe in some kind of Fabian, peaceful, in the sense that there won't be any ups and downs and so on, model. We believe that it can be without civil war, but we warn that there is always the danger that the bourgeoisie will resist, including after a working class government comes to power, and that we need to prepare against that eventuality. But the important thing is, of course, to try to ensure, in fact, to ensure that one has the conscious support of the majority of the population for a socialist program, that one doesn't jump ahead of the population and put oneself in a position where one hasn't got that support and where the only way to keep in power is by using autocratic regimes. The simple fact of the matter is that the Chilean example is not an example which can legitimately be transferred to Western European countries, to the extent that the Chilean constitution allowed a left-wing president to take over office with all the problems that entailed, with only 36% of the votes. In France, the left will come to power on the basis of an absolute majority of the population, and the Italian perspective is based on a larger majority still as a basis for, as far as possible, neutralizing the ability of the bourgeoisie to prevent the development in the direction of socialism. It's not, I repeat, a question of what the bourgeoisie wants, it's a question of what the bourgeoisie is in a position to do. Comrade Mandel denies that there is any internationalism in the communist movement. This is nonsense, particularly as far as the Western European communist parties is concerned, where, in fact, we have got an increasing amount of contact and discussion between the Western European parties, both on the basis of a conference like the Brussels conference a while back, and on the basis of bilateral and multilateral contacts, meetings like the one in Madrid between Carrillo, Berlinguer and Marché, and in general all the time the development of such contacts, with the perspective, of course, that when our countries advance towards socialism, it be done within the basis of the support and so on of the working class and socialist movement in the other Western European countries, which should make the position considerably easier. Trotsky himself, you know, wrote at one time that when, in fact, several advanced countries, 2 or 3 actually, he said, have got socialism, then a peaceful road to socialism will be much easier. And we make no promises, but we believe that this is the perspective, the framework within which this kind of development will take place. We also have got contacts, despite the differences on political issues and so on, between a number of communist parties on a European level, the Berlin Conference last year, with its special emphasis on the struggle for peace and security, an issue which has been grossly not only neglected, but in fact opposed in terms of peaceful coexistence by the Trotskyist movement. Again and again, the Trotskyists have denounced peaceful coexistence. I mean, I've got here a thing from Krivine in which he refers to a policy of peaceful coexistence as a dagger blow in the back of the revolutionary movement. And this, which you cheer in a world in which there are atomic weapons which could blow up the whole of civilization and make this country and the other countries a mass of radioactive rubble, which would hardly be a condition for the building up of a socialist society. Of course, I'm not suggesting that the comrades in the Trotskyist organizations want this. They believe that a maximalist program of socialist revolution alone can achieve it. What you do if you're not at the stage of being able to get that is, of course, another matter. And let's not forget that the Fourth International, the one which Mandel heads, actually, some years ago, was preaching the inevitability of a Third World War. Oh, yes, it was. I've got the thesis of the Third World Congress. And I have also got the statement of the then Secretary of the Fourth International in his book La Guerre qui vient, The Coming War, which was published officially by the Fourth International in the name of the Fourth International and never repudiated by the Fourth International, which in fact gives the logical corollary of this. I quote him, where, he asks, is the wisdom if one does not utilize when one is strong, and if one leaves the reality, one leaves in reality to the enemy to choose the moment of attack, where is the use of the superior strength that one has? The Leninist wisdom is synonymous with revolutionary audacity and of a revolutionary approach without illusions of the situation. The USSR was afraid of the revolutionary consequences of war, not for capitalism, but for its own regime of a privileged caste. And going on to argue that the Soviet Union at that time was stronger, it was an illusion anyway, but even if it had been right, in terms of analysis, was stronger than the capitalist countries, and therefore it should have given a preemptive strike, a line which is now confined to the Posadists and which the Fourth International likes to forget about, and in fact shows the extent of the lack of realism and the irresponsibility and, incidentally, the dishonesty in facing up to its own past, because it wants to sweep it under the counter, and if you look at Pierre Franck's history of the Fourth International, nothing is said about it, but Posadas years later is attacked for putting the very position which was the official position of the Fourth International. This seems to me to be a measure, A, of the irresponsibility, and B, of the bomb happiness with which accusations are put in terms of lacking revolutionary audacity. Well, if revolutionary audacity, comrades, lies in making a preemptive strike for a Third World War, as the Trotskyists would have liked to have done, they can have their revolutionary audacity. I would prefer to see a perspective of socialist revolution on a more peaceful and realistic basis, as I believe is possible in the world today. So, comrades, in conclusion, would I say the great bulk of you have come here with strong disagreements with the policy of the Communist Party. Many of you with, I think, a very distorted view of what our position actually is. I hope that you will, some of you, attempt to study our documents at first hand, and you will come to see, I believe, at least if Mardell and I have a debate, not even in 9 years' time, but in 4 or 5 years' time, that substantial transformations in the direction of socialism will have taken place in Western Europe, not under the leadership of Fourth International organizations, not on the basis of the repetition of the October Revolution, but on the lines of the strategy outlined by Western European Communist parties. But I am content to allow time to tell. Thank you, Comrade.